All right, we'll continue to talk about the next question. So basically, we're gonna look at a little bit more complicated case. So in this question, we say we have the initial investment, which is $100, and the interest rate per year will be 10%. Right? So the question is, what is the value of the investment each year over the next 5 years? And how much is the interest is the simple interest and how much is the compound interest, right? We're going to look at this question by making everything in the table, right? So this question is a little bit more complicated in a way that we're now looking at many more years, 5 years in this case. So actually in the future, we can make the calculation for 10, 20, 11, all different kinds of years, right? So there's something that I want to learn, which is we're going to apply the function. We're going to learn how to apply the function so that we don't have to type in the equation one by one, right? Let me show you what I mean by that, right? So let's start from the very first column here, which is what is the beginning amount for year one, right? For beginning amount at year one, so this is fairly easy, right? Which is $100. Again, we're not going to type in this $100. We are going to refer this as D25, right? So this is a D25, which is $100, right? So the next one is what is the simple interest? What is the compound total ending amount and the amount with simple interest? So the simple interest is easier to calculate. Remember, the simple interest is always going to be the initial investment multiplied by the interest rate. So in our case, we know the initial investment will be D25 again, multiply this by 10%, which is D25. Okay. And then the compound interest, right? Remember from the previous calculation, we know the compound interest is the difference between total interest and simple interest, right? We don't know the total interest yet, so we're going to leave this compound interest for later calculation. We're going to come back for this one, okay? For total interest, right? So we know the total interest is the difference between the ending amount and beginning amount, right? So again, we want to calculate the ending amount first, right? Well, the ending amount we know is going to be the beginning amount multiplied by 1 plus this interest rate, which is D26, right? If we do that, that will give us $110. Now we know what is the total interest, right? So the total interest, again, from our previous calculation, we know this is the difference between the ending amount for this year minus the beginning amount for this year. And the compound interest is the difference between the total interest minus the simple interest, right? And the amount with simple interest will be amount with the simple interest will be how much we start with, which is our initial investment, plus the simple interest from this year. Right? If we move forward to year two, we know the beginning amount for year two will simply be the ending amount for year one, right? So where you end up with will become how much you want to reinvest for the next year. So we know this will be equal to this G31, right? So you may want to make the calculation as we did for year one, step by step. But actually, we have a much easier way to do. So that's why we want to teach you Excel. So basically, we say if this beginning amount is always the ending amount, right? So it's always referring to the ending amount for the previous year. We can actually drag the equation by, if you put your mouse on the lower right corner and you apply this, drag it all the way down, you want to keep holding the left click, okay? So you'll see if you double click here, you will see the beginning amount for year three is equal to the ending amount for year two. Of course, we don't have the ending amount for year two yet. Okay, so this is a missing value here. don't worry about it for now. We're gonna see it will pop out once we're done with everything. This is for the beginning amount. And we want to look at the ending amount here. If we click the equation, we know the ending amount will be the beginning amount for this year, multiply 1 plus this interest rate, which is D26, right? So for next year, if we type in the equation, that will be the beginning amount, multiply 1 plus this D26 here, right? So if we look at the difference between the ending amount for year 1 and ending amount for year 2, the beginning amount is moving, right, from this C31 to C32, but the interest rate is always this D26, right? So therefore, we want to make sure this one is not changing, but this D26, we're always want to referring to this D26. How do we do that? We can press F4 on the keyboard. If you press it once, you will notice there's a dollar sign in from the D and the dollar sign in from the 26. That means if we want to apply the equation, we will always refer to this D26. So this 10% will never change. We call this the absolute self-reference. Absolute self-reference. Okay. And if we want to apply the equation all the way to down, we can see this is the last one. There's no value here. The reason, if you notice, there's something wrong with here because we pressed F4, we didn't press enter. So it will go back to the original function. If we press enter and then we redo this, you'll notice the number change. Actually, can always double click and see whether this is the equation that you want the equation to be, right? So this is for ending amount. For total interest, we also know this is the difference between the ending amount and beginning amount for each year. It's always changing. We don't have to fix any cell, right? So that'll make our life much easier. We're just going to drag this all the way down here. And compound interest is going to be always the difference between the total and simple. We're going to drag it all the way down. How about for the simple interest? Remember, the simple interest is going to be always the initial investment multiplied by the interest rate, right? So we say this will never change. That means we're going to use self-reference for both of them. Press F4 for this one and press F4 for the second one. Remember to click enter, okay, to fix this equation. We double click, we see the equation, the function is there. And once we're done, we want to apply this equation all the way to very last year. So the simple interest is always $10. So that makes sense. So if you notice, after we have done everything will be automatically pop up a number. So we don't have to make the calculation for every single year. Just imagine if we're making calculation for 30, 40 years, it's going to be a lot of work. But in this case, we can apply the equation to all the years moving forward. So that can save us a lot of time, right? And the last one is the amount with simple interest, right? So in our case, the amount with simple interest is always what we have plus the simple interest for this year, okay? And we are going to apply this equation all the way down so that we can, again, drag this to the very last year, right? So the total, we can make the total for simple interest, compound interest, and total interest as well. And we can make the sum of all those years simple interest. So 5 years, the simple interest is $50, okay? The total interest, we can do the sum as well, which is 61, and compound is pop out here, right? So this is the difference between these two, right? So that's how we make the calculation for this one.